Hey, how's it going? Rob from Upstart Epoxy. What are we gonna do today? We are gonna take these beautiful, beautiful cottonwood slabs. We're gonna take some amazing off-white epoxy and we're gonna turn them into a 30-inch by 60-inch epoxy resin river table, but then it's gonna be a racetrack oval. Check out the whole process as we go through making this racetrack oval table. It's gonna be awesome. We're gonna start on the table saw. We're gonna start on the table saw, and we're gonna rip the form to an approximate leg. When I make forms, I like to make them about a ½ inch too large. And I do that intentionally because I know when I pour it, when the slabs get in the form, they're gonna kind of float in the water a little bit. When I tape the form, sometimes they might not be all the way up against the side walls. And we want to make sure the final table is the exact perfect size. So what we wind up doing is I make the form a little bit larger than I need to make it to ensure that it's going to be the correct size at the end of the day. Because the last thing you want is to turn around and pour a table and all of a sudden it's just being too small for your customer or for yourself, for the space. You'd rather make it a little bit larger and then cut it down to size after it's all said and done. Even though that takes a little bit more epoxy to do that, it prevents you from having to redo the whole piece if it just winds up being too small. And now when I make the oval tables too, speaking of using extra epoxy, I actually like to make the form in the shape of an oval. And I do that because I don't want to waste a ton of extra epoxy all at the corners of the oval, if that makes sense. Because that's an absolute waste of epoxy. You're going to wind up cutting it off and not using it. So I make the form itself to be an oval, about a ½ inch larger in size on either dimension, to ensure that I don't waste too much epoxy, but I also make sure to have the perfect size table at the end of the day. So here we go. We're going to take it to the table saw and we're going to start ripping it. So I've already pre-measured this. I've already got my table saw set up. I'm going to just rip it to the width of the oval first. And now what are we going to do is we're going to take this and rip the walls of it. Now those slabs are 2 inches thick. The final table is not going to be that thick. The final table is going to be like 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. And that's the depth of the pour that I'm going to do on this, even though those are a little bit longer. So I want to make sure that the walls of the project, the walls of the form, are big enough to hold all of the epoxy. So I'm going to cut the walls to about 3.5 inches. Now that's going to compensate for the thickness of the plywood, and that's going to compensate for the thickness of the pour as well. Even though those slabs, again, are 2 inches, we're not going with a final 2-inch thick table here. We're going with a little bit of a slimmer profile. But again, we're going to rip it to 3.5 inches to compensate for that. We're going to get a whole bunch of strips on this, and then we're going to run them on the miter saw so that they're flexible. Check this out. So when we go ahead and we wrap the circle, after we cut the 2 circle ends of it, we're going to need to make sure the plywood is flexible so we can turn around and we can wrap it and get that nice smooth oval section. So we're going to rip this to 3.5, then we're going to cut the circles on the oval itself. We're going to cut these side walls so that they're flexible, and we are going to build that form. Okay, so to cut this oval, I know I need my drywall square. Okay, I want to make sure to find the center on it. That's absolutely imperative, to find the center. So go ahead, get my drywall square up and running. Okay. Now again, I'm cutting 2 round ends. This is going to be a racetrack oval table, different than an ellipse oval. An ellipse oval is going to kind of have a nice smooth curve, if you can see that, whereas a racetrack oval is going to kind of look like a NASCAR track shape. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're talking about projects. Now that gets me perfectly down the center. The other thing is I need the radius, right? This is going to be 30 inches at the end of the day, so we went 30.5 inches when we wound up making it. So when we go ahead and do this, right, we want to find where the center of that half circle, that hemisphere, is going to be. So right now, if you can kind of picture it, it's going to look like that. We need to find right where the center of that circle, or that half circle, is going to be, and strike that radius. The way that we're going to actually strike that radius is I've got a compass. Really, it's just a quick board that fastens to the bottom of my router. I've got it all set up. It's all marked and ready to go at the right dimensions. And I'm just going to screw it into the template and then run the router over it until I cut a perfect arc on it. Now there's a little bit of curve here, a little bit of extra there. Remember, I made this pattern a little bit larger than what I needed the whole project to be. So because of that, I can afford to have a little bit of extra there, right? I kind of planned that. So I'm going to turn around and just kind of curve this off so it's a nice smooth connection. Now this is the base of the form. This is absolutely the base of the form. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those extra pieces of plywood I cut and I'm going to wrap it around the edge. I'm going to overlap it. On the curve, I'm going to have to finish nail it in. On the sidewalls, I'll probably screw it. I'll probably finish nail it because I'll already have that out ready to run. But again, that's the next step. That's the next step on the form. But before I do that, I need to get the slabs to the right size that I want them finished at. So the way that I do that when I have a curve like this and on an epoxy table is I'm going to take the slabs, I'm going to put them on the workbench as if I want it, as the way that I want them arranged. Then I'm going to take this, I'm going to set it on top, and I'm going to trace an arc for it. Okay, utilizing this as the pattern. We want to decide how they're going to be laid out, right? Now this customer of mine, they want me to try to get live edge on both sides of the table, which is going to be not super easy, but I think it's going to end up working out. Now these slabs are not prepped for epoxy yet. They'll get prepped in a little bit. I'm going to have to sand down all this bark, but we're still in the rough cut stage, so we're not ready quite to finish it. So anyways, so the live edge part, the final thickness, right? We want to go about 30 inches as the final thickness of the piece. Now this customer, while they want live edge, they want the center area to be as clean as possible. And now, so I just take the form, I'm just going to set it on and kind of arrange it the best. So I'm not going to take that river and put it right down the center of the table. I don't think it would look that good. So instead, I'm going to kind of angle this form anyways, and what that's going to achieve, you know, I've got about my 3-inch river. It's going to look stellar. A little bit of live edge there, a little bit of live edge here. I think maybe we could get some more live edge on the right hand side, maybe a smaller river. Yeah, look at that. Take a look at that layout. That's about what we're looking at. I want to keep these a little bit separate to have the epoxy go all the way through, just to make sure it's really strong and durable at the end of the day. going to be a little bit of light sanding on this. Look at that. That's what the final table is going to look like. Filled with white epoxy in the center. This thing is going to look stellar. It's going to be absolutely on point. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of plywood and cut it so I can bend it for the curve on the oval table. In order to do that, my miter saw and a lot of miter saws have a little flip stop right here. It's like a depth stop, so that when it's off, the saw goes all the way down, right? But when it's not off or when it's on, we have the stop that's adjustable and the saw doesn't go all the way down. That allows me to cut little thin strips or leave little thin strips on the bottom. So I'm going to go back and forth with the saw now until I cut it enough so that it's bendable to the right radius. Also on this is I put kind of a piece here as a block so that I can keep this out from the fence. The reason why I need to keep it out from the fence is because if it's right up against the fence, it's not going to be able to go through because the blade's not designed to go all the way through with the curve of the blade. So again, I put that block there to move the piece out from the fence. Be really careful when you're doing this because of that. And I'm also using this adjustable flip stop here, depth gauge, I guess that's what you call it, to make sure that I don't cut all the way through the piece of plywood. And again, this is so that I can cut it and get that curve wrapped perfectly and tight. Let's do this. All right, so what is the next step on this project? I have the oval form ready to go, except that I need to get the walls on. So the way I need to get the walls on the oval form is I have taken, you saw me do this, right? You saw me cut this so it's bendable, so I can get that radius. Now I'm gonna take the caulk, some silicone caulk so that the water can't go through it, won't ruin it, and it's gonna dry real fast too. I'm gonna put a bead on the bottom of the curved piece here, and then I'm going to start nailing it around the form with a finish nailer. You know, normally on most forms I'm going to use screws to hold it really, really tight, but in this case the screws aren't going to hold through that. But what's going to wind up happening is I'm going to put a whole lot of finish nails in it so it snugs it up really nice. The silicone's going to end up gluing it just fine, and then the tape that I'm going to put on top of the walls are going to hold it and really kind of secure it down and make this thing watertight. Why do we want it watertight? Because Upstart epoxy is almost water thin, and when you turn around and you go to pour it, the last thing you want is this form to leak. So this is one of the absolutely imperative portions on it. I'm going to run a really tiny bead of caulk all the way around the perimeter to make sure that final piece, small, tiny bead of caulk, just to fill in that final gap that might be there. Again, we don't want it to leak. The very last thing we want on the form, is to have your epoxy on the ground. Before you decide on a tape to use though, do a test, please do a test, because you would hate to turn around and you would absolutely hate for your form to be ready and then your epoxy to leak on that form. There you have it. We built the form. We're going to tape it and we're going to do the pour. Let's do this. We are ready. Make the deep pour. Take a look. We've got it all set up. We've got the table leveled. We've got these hold down clamps ready to go so the slabs don't start floating on us when we do the deep pour. Right now, we're gonna mix it up. We're gonna get that perfect color for this piece, and then we're gonna pour the deep pour. I need about like 9 quarts for this, right? I measured it already. I'm gonna measure out 9 quarts of these two deep pour. We're gonna start pouring out part A. We're gonna get 6 quarts of part A and then 3/4 of part B, because we want the 2-to-1 ratio, of course. So take a look. So I want 6/4 of part A, right? And so I'm going to end up using this whole gallon. I know that because a gallon's 4 quarts. So I'm going to turn around and just poke some holes in this so it vents a little bit easier, comes out a little bit smoother, since I'm going to use all 4 quarts anyways. But I'm going to measure it just for completeness. Here we go. So that's 4 quarts. We need 2 more of this to make it 6, and then we're going to use 3/4 of part B. Okay, set those to the side. Now we're going to start mixing this. You'll notice it starts out a little cloggy, or cloudy. Then we're going to turn around once we start cleaning it. Once we start mixing it, that cloudiness is going to clear up. Again, we want to make sure not to whip it. We just want to mix it. Grab a stir stick to scrape the sides and the bottom. Just make sure to get all the good parts integrated perfectly. Now the main color on this is going to be white, but we're going to mix this specially formulated brown that I made here, and that brown is going to give this final epoxy a nice slight cream tint to it. Not bright white, but a little bit off-white, a little bit of a cream color to it. So we're going to start by just doing straight white, and then after we do that, we're going to put just a teensy bit of that brown color in. So here comes the white. Whole bunch of pigment on this because we want a beautiful, bright white. All right, here we go. This is the best part. It's like a big cloud in the bottom. That white, that's for sure. All right, here we go. We're going to put just a little bit of this in, a little bit at a time. Make sure we get the perfect color. Because if we go too brown, we're going to have to mix up a new batch, and who wants to do that? All right, let's do this. It's time for the pour. This is the best part. All of the work comes together right now. All that hard work, all the preparation. I love it. Here we go. Fill in some of these cracks, some of these splits. Remember, this one's not going to go full depth anyways. I'm going to shave this down to like 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches anyways. But I want to make sure to fill it so that I get all of the checks and splits and cracks on the slabs perfectly filled. How do you know when it's actually finished, right? Like, how do you know when it's actually cured? Well, I would recommend on a spot that you're not too worried about, kind of giving it a touch with a gloved hand. If it's still tacky, certainly don't try to crack the form. But once it starts to get hard, I would say wait 12 hours, 24 hours, okay, to make sure it fully hardens all the way through the form. And once that's the case, you'll be in really great shape. All right, what's going on? It is time for one of my all-time favorite parts of the project, cracking it out of the form. Now, we have this beautiful racetrack oval epoxy river resin table that we are going to open up so that it says hello to the world. How do I do that? Well, first I need these blocks off. So this is a fun part because I get to hit them off and they kind of get to fly across the shop. So here we go. Woo! Another one. Woo! And another one. Woo! And another one. Woo! Let's go this way. There it is. That's always fun for me. So now, we need to turn around and just crack the edges. One of the great things about this is that, you know, even though it's a big circle here, this form was built in multiple stages. So like these side pieces are totally separate than the curved pieces. So that means it's just going to crack open a little bit easier. So here we go. Let's start on this side. Again, when you go to crack this open, if you're nervous about scratching the top of your tabletop or the surface that you're working on, I would say maybe put a little board there, maybe put a piece of paper, a pad. I like to take the hammer and just kind of run it on the side, on the top of the tabletop. In this case, I'm planing this down pretty good on the finished product, but so I'm not too worried about denting or cracking the top of the tabletop because I'm going to put this on the router sled and plane it down. So I'm not too worried about that, so I'm just going to slide this on the top of the table. So here we go. Crack it open. Now these sides are going to come off nice. I'm going to do these pieces first because that's just easiest, the straightest. Just push it down. Check it out. Here we go. Say hello to the world for the first time. Look at this. This is the bottom. But it kind of gives you an idea of the final shape of it a little bit better, a little bit cleaner. Check out that, right? We got to plane this thing down. Once we plane this thing down, we're going to trim it up and make it absolutely beautiful. Here's the top. I can't wait to get this on the work surface, on the table. Use that router sled. Plane it down nice and flat, perfectly level, perfectly parallel sides, and then finish it up, put some legs on it. Here we go. That's next. Let's do this. Take a look at this. I want to show you how we built this racetrack oval epoxy resin river tabletop. Matched with this beautiful base. It's got this nice, kind of slim epoxy resin river. Beautiful cream colored epoxy that we mixed up, a custom color for this person. And look at this, we put a nice matte film finish on top of it that bonds with the epoxy extraordinarily well to give it keep it a nice natural color on the slab and on the base. Take a look at how we built this thing in this video. And by the way, don't forget to subscribe, smash that like button, and turn on notifications for Upstart Epoxy. Let's do this.